I learned a lesson about love the hard way. Not in words, not in promises, but in silence. The kind of silence that presses on your chest. My mother had always been there. Not flashy, not loud. Just steady, reliable. Every birthday cake, every scraped knee, every night I came home late. She was there, always. Then one morning, she wasn't. Not really. Welcome to the Dad Chronicles. Get settled because this one is going to take you somewhere. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to want to see this story through. My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 59 years old. I've spent my life trying to be a good husband, a good son, a man who keeps his word. Turns out, keeping the peace is not the same as having peace. I learned that the hard way. It was Tuesday, March 12th, 6:38 a.m. The kind of morning that smells like rain but feels like winter. I was pouring coffee into my favorite mug, the one with the cracked handle, when my phone buzzed. "Harold," Mom's voice came through, thin and urgent. "Something's wrong with my left arm. It's tingly." I froze. Mom, Eleanor Bennett, never complained. Never asked for help. She had survived raising 3 kids alone, weathered a mortgage collapse in '87, and still found time to volunteer every Saturday at the animal shelter. I said the first thing that came to mind. "I'm coming, Mom. Sit tight. Don't move." The next sound made my blood run cold. My wife, Vanessa, appeared at the kitchen doorway, robe tied, hair wrapped in a towel, eyes that calculated, always calculated. She looked at me like I was asking for something unreasonable. "Harold," she said slowly, deliberately, "I can't take the day off. I have meetings. Dinner with the Thompsons tonight. You'll have to figure it out yourself." I blinked. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't sigh. It was worse than anger. It was indifference, folded neatly into routine. I stayed still for a moment, coffee steaming, handle digging into my palm. Then I remembered the first lesson Eleanor ever taught me. Action matters more than words. Without thinking, I dialed Clinton Ward, 73 years old, retired bus driver, lived 2 streets over. A man who had shown up for my mother more times than I could count. "Clinton," I said, voice tight. "My mom needs a ride to St. Augustine Medical. I can't use my truck. Vanessa won't let me borrow hers. Can you help?" No hesitation. "Give me 5 minutes, Harold. I'll be at your driveway." I hung up, swallowed hard, and turned back to Vanessa. She was already walking back toward the bedroom. "Dinner plans," she called over her shoulder. Her robe swished like a warning. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I simply moved. By 6:50 a.m., Clinton's old Ford had pulled up. I helped Mom into the passenger seat. Her small hand rested in mine, trembling slightly, the other clutching her blue cardigan tightly around her shoulders. The morning air smelled of wet leaves and exhaust, but somehow it felt like safety. We drove to St. Augustine in silence. Mom's eyes were on the passing houses. Not scared. Not panicked. Just waiting. The hospital was busy for a Tuesday morning. Check-in took longer than I liked. Nurses hustling, phones ringing, monitors beeping. Mom held my hand until a tall, composed man in a white coat appeared, Dr. Leonard Hayes. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, calm, deliberate. "We're going to run some tests. You're safe, but we need to be thorough." She nodded once, touched my cheek lightly. "You came," she whispered. I felt it then. The full weight of 59 years of love, compressed into 2 simple words. I stayed by her side in the ER waiting area. Plastic chairs, fluorescent lights, a TV mounted on the wall playing a muted morning show. The coffee machine nearby smelled like burnt metal. I didn't touch it. Didn't need it. Vanessa didn't call. Not once. I glanced at my phone. 4 missed messages. All from her. Her carefully crafted composure in digital form. Mom, meanwhile, held my hand like she always had. Small, warm, callous just slightly from years of gardening. Her eyes flicked to the clock above the nurse's station, 7:42 a.m. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Clinton appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame like a man who'd seen too much to be fazed. "Stable?" he asked quietly. I nodded. He gave a short, approving whistle and settled into a chair next to me. "Smart woman," he said, eyes on Mom. "She's always been smart." The doctor returned 35 minutes later. "Mild cardiac event," he said, measured. "Not a full heart attack, but we'll keep her for observation. Adjust medications, run tests. She's stable." Mom nodded, her gaze steady. Her hand squeezed mine just slightly. "You came," she said again. I felt my throat tighten. Vanessa called just as the doctor left. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Her words had already proven themselves irrelevant. By 10:15 a.m., Mom had been settled into a room. She refused the hospital gown, insisted on wearing her own blue cardigan. She opened a crossword puzzle, glasses perched on the tip of her nose. 7 letters, she said, calm as ever. I sat across from her, terrible hospital coffee in hand. The kind that tastes like regret and sadness, but I didn't care. This room, this chair, this moment, it was mine. It was where I needed to be. I could feel the storm coming. Not outside. Not in the ER. But at home. In that house where Vanessa's priorities would always outweigh anything human. Anything tender. Mom looked up suddenly. "Harold, I want you to listen to me carefully." Her voice was firm, deliberate, the tone of someone used to being heard. "I need to update my will." She held my gaze. No hesitation. No apology. I swallowed hard. The weight of the day, of Vanessa's indifference, of Mom's vulnerability, settled over me. I nodded. "Of course, Mom." She smiled faintly, almost amused. Not at me, not at the situation, just at the quiet inevitability of doing the right thing, even if it hurt, even if the world around her refused to care. By 11:02 a.m., her lawyer, Mr. Paul Donnelly, arrived. Tall, thin, silver hair combed meticulously, navy suit impeccable. Shook my hand firmly. Nodded at Mom like he'd been expecting this call for decades. He didn't look at me again. Not necessary. Mom handed him her folded note with clear instructions. Every account, every property, every possession, carefully documented. Vanessa's name appeared 0 times. Not a single mention. I let that sit in the air. She wasn't doing it for me. She was doing it because she was right. Because she always had been. By 12:05 p.m., the documents were being signed. I sat quietly in the corner, witness to a quiet but seismic shift. Vanessa could not undo this. No text, no dinner. No carefully curated performance could reverse what Mom had already done. Mom looked up from her papers, glasses sliding slightly down her nose. "Remember this, Harold," she said softly. "Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, but it always arrives." I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. Not anger. Not triumph. Just clarity. By 1:14 p.m., Mom was settled back in her hospital room. Crossword finished. Tea steeped just right. Her cardigan neatly folded over the chair. Like armor she didn't need to announce but always wore. I sat beside her. Hands wrapped around my own coffee cup, still bitter and cold. She studied me quietly. "You stayed," she said. I didn't need to speak. She didn't need to say more. The room felt like a sanctuary. Outside, nurses moved briskly. Carts clattered down the hall. The intercom crackled faintly. Inside, time slowed. Mom's small hand rested in mine, the one that had buttoned my coat, packed my lunches, held my hand through scraped knees and heartbreaks alike. That hand was still steady, still warm, still Eleanor Bennett, Vanessa called again. 9 missed calls. 4 texts. I stared at the phone. Mom watched quietly. I didn't answer. Mom's eyes flicked toward the window. The morning light fell soft across her face, highlighting the fine lines that carried decades of decisions, of love, of persistence. "Harold," she said softly, "you know, not everyone shows up the way they should." I nodded. "Yes, Mom." She smiled faintly, a small, private curve of lips that carried no accusation, only observation. Then she reached for her phone, found the lawyer's number neatly folded in her wallet. No hesitation. Every instruction precise, deliberate, every wish accounted for, every consequence anticipated. At 1:58 p.m., Paul Donnelly arrived at the hospital. His briefcase clicked as he set it down. He acknowledged me with a nod. No questions, no commentary. The woman across from him, small in her hospital gown, exuded calm authority. Every line she dictated, every box she checked, every decision she made final. Irrevocable, unassailable. Vanessa didn't appear. She wouldn't. Her priorities were elsewhere. Dinner, work, appearances, all carefully curated performances. Meanwhile, Mom acted. Silently, legally, permanently. I watched as the papers were signed, as pens clicked against the legal pad, as the weight of years of neglect, of indifference, of inattention, finally found its quiet counterbalance. Mom leaned back in her chair after the last signature, eyes clear, steady, unshakable. "Harold," she said softly, "sometimes you have to act alone. Sometimes the world won't do right by you, so you do it yourself. That's all there is to it." I felt it then. The full measure of 59 years of watching her, learning from her, being loved by her. A quiet dignity. A simple righteousness. I took a deep breath. Not anger. Not triumph. Just clarity. Clinton had waited outside the hospital for hours. When I finally walked him back to the car, he didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Some things are self-evident. We drove in silence, the city passing by, indifferent, busy, oblivious. The oak leaves spun across the windshield like confetti from some unseen celebration. I didn't feel celebration. I felt release. By 4:30 p.m., Mom was home. Maplewood Drive. The familiar colonial with green shutters, white trim, and the welcoming porch where I had learned to ride my bike. The house smelled faintly of chamomile and old wood. Mom moved through the kitchen with careful grace, checking the thermostat, the fridge, the labels on her medications. Everything in order. Everything under control. Everything hers. I made her tea. Steeped 4 minutes. Just the way she liked it. We sat together at the kitchen table, silent but together. Hands wrapped around mugs. The quiet between us full of unspoken gratitude. Vanessa called again. This time I let it ring longer. 30 missed calls. 27 texts. All carefully composed, all demanding, all irrelevant. Mom watched silently, the corner of her mouth just barely lifting. "You'll answer when you're ready," she said softly. I nodded, and I realized something. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about anger. It was about clarity, about seeing people clearly, about understanding what loyalty, love, and respect really meant. Mom looked at me over her glasses, calm, serene, unshakable. "You understand, don't you?" she asked. I did, in my bones. The next morning, Thursday, March 14th, 6:05 a.m., I woke before the alarm. Sunlight spilling pale through the blinds, dust motes dancing like tiny witnesses. Vanessa was still asleep, sprawled across the bed, perfectly composed in repose. Completely unaware. Completely indifferent. I went downstairs. Coffee, the loud machine grinding beans into bitter perfection. No apology. No resentment. Just the clarity of doing what had to be done. Mom had insisted on handling the will updates herself. I had offered to help. She had refused. "You'll learn more by watching," she said. By 8 a.m., we were at Paul Donnelly's office. Navy suit, silver hair, glasses perched just right. Mom carried herself with that quiet authority only she could command. Her small frame, hospital cardigan carefully folded in her bag, her purse clasped tightly. The receptionist looked at her as though she had walked in carrying a storm. "Mrs. Bennett," Paul said warmly, "ready?" Mom smiled faintly. "Always," she said. We went into his office. Sunlight hitting the oak desk just right. Legal pads stacked neatly. Mom handed over her carefully prepared notes. Accounts, property, investments, charitable donations, every detail considered. Vanessa's name appeared precisely 0 times. Paul's pen clicked. Mom's instructions dictated. My hand rested on mine, small but firm. I didn't speak. Didn't need to. Everything was unfolding exactly as it should. She looked up once during the signing, eyes steady, unwavering. "Harold," she said quietly, "the world doesn't wait for fairness. You have to create it yourself." By 11:47 a.m., the documents were complete. Finalized, legal, unassailable. The house, the investments, the jewelry, the vehicles, and all accounted for. Vanessa's expectations dissolved quietly in the paperwork. She could no longer claim influence or entitlement. Mom leaned back in her chair, crossed her hands over her lap. A faint smile. "Harold," she said softly, "sometimes you have to watch the people around you to see who will show up, and who won't. That's all the lesson there is." I felt something shift in me. Not anger. Not satisfaction. A quiet sense of release. Of finally knowing where I stood. We left the office around 12:15 p.m. Clinton's old Ford waited outside. Mom slid into the passenger seat effortlessly. Seatbelt clicked. She looked at me, faintly amused. "You kept your cool," she said. I nodded. I had a good teacher. The drive back was quiet. The streets familiar. Maplewood Drive approaching. The house where I grew up, where she had built a life, brick by brick, without complaint, without attention. Mom climbed the front steps. Every movement precise, dignified. She paused, hands on the railing, looking back at me. "Harold," she said, voice low, deliberate. "You understand why this had to be done?" I nodded. "Yes, Mom, I understand." Inside, she moved through the house like she owned every corner. She checked the thermostat, the mail, the fridge, her medications. Everything in order. Everything under control. Everything hers. Vanessa called again. This time, 34 missed calls. 31 texts. All carefully worded, all irrelevant. Mom watched silently as I let the phone buzz. She raised an eyebrow, almost imperceptibly. "You'll answer when it matters," she said. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply sat with her at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around mugs of tea. The quiet was full of everything that had been missing in our lives. Mom looked at me. "You know, Harold, loyalty and love deserve a legacy," she said softly. I nodded. "Yes, Mom, I do." Friday, March 15th, 7:12 a.m. I woke to the soft hum of the coffee machine downstairs. Vanessa was still asleep, tangled in blankets, her alarm set and ignored. I let her be. Mom was already downstairs, her cardigan folded neatly over the chair, mug in hand, crossword book open. The faint smell of chamomile drifted through the kitchen. She looked up at me. "You came," she said quietly. The same words she had said in the hospital, but somehow heavier this time. Full of decades of trust, of love, of constancy. I nodded. "Yes, Mom, I came." Vanessa stirred as I poured coffee for both of us. Her robe slightly askew, hair messy, eyes wary. She looked at Mom. Her gaze flicked to me, then back at Mom. She said nothing. Finally, she spoke, voice controlled, careful. "Harold, we need to talk about this. Situation." I turned slowly, deliberately. Vanessa's composure, that careful veneer, cracked slightly. I didn't speak yet. I just let the silence settle. Let the truth hang in the room. Mom sipped her tea. Crossword completed for the day. She watched quietly. Eyes clear, unwavering. The calm before a storm I knew Vanessa could never navigate. "You refused to help my mother yesterday," I said finally, calm, deliberate. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. I had plans," she said, voice tight. "Dinner with the Thompsons. Meetings. All carefully curated priorities." Mom looked at her once. No anger, no commentary, just observation. I continued. "She had a medical emergency. Your choice was simple. Show up or don't. You chose not to." Vanessa's mouth opened, closed, words failing her. I stepped closer, careful, steady. No yelling. No accusations. Just facts. Mom reached across the table, placed her hand over mine. Warm, steady, unshakable. "You understand why I did what I did," she said softly. I nodded. "Yes, Mom, I understand." Vanessa looked from Mom to me, and I finally saw it. Not fear, not anger. Recognition. The realization of the consequences her choices had wrought. All the careful planning, the dinners, the appearances. Meaningless. She had lost me. Not to someone else. Not to circumstance. To clarity. To truth. Her phone buzzed. The 38th call from my mother's number. I picked it up, turned it face down on the table. Mom's hand squeezed mine gently. "You'll answer when you're ready," she said. I looked at Vanessa one last time. Her face, pale, unsure, finally honest. I felt nothing but clarity. No anger, no bitterness. Just release. I turned back to Mom. "Tea?" I asked softly. She nodded. We sat together, hands wrapped around mugs, the morning sun spilling across the kitchen floor. Outside, the world continued as always. Inside, everything had shifted. Vanessa retreated to her room, her priorities intact, her ego bruised, but her influence over my life finally gone. Mom looked at me, eyes steady. "You've been showing up alone for a very long time, Harold," she said. Her voice dropped slightly, deliberate. "Now you know, a man like you, a man who shows up, deserves someone standing next to him when he does." I nodded, throat tight. "Yes, Mom, I do." The quiet settled, not as silence, but as peace. A life seen clearly, a loyalty honored, a love rewarded, not with revenge but with consequence-meeting choice. Later, as I walked onto the porch, the cold March air hit my face. Clean, honest, free. Vanessa's house behind me. Mom's voice still in my ears. Loyalty and love deserve a legacy. I exhaled, long, deep. The kind of exhale that comes from letting go of what never belonged to you. I turned back once. Vanessa stood in the window, phone in hand, 38 missed calls glowing in the morning light. I smiled faintly. "You should probably answer that," I whispered to the empty air. I stepped off the porch, into clarity, into freedom, into a life finally seen as it was. I walked to my truck, keys in hand, sunlight catching the frost on the windshield. The world smelled sharp, cold, honest. I didn't feel anger, not regret, not relief exactly, just clarity. A quiet, unmistakable understanding of what had always been true. Mom's voice lingered in my mind. "You've been showing up. You deserve someone who does the same." Vanessa would learn her lesson. Not from shouting, not from confrontation, not from pleading. She would learn from consequence, from the absence of what she refused to give. I started the engine. The old radio came on, low, something familiar. Something my father used to hum on Saturday mornings in the garage. I let it play. I didn't make any other decisions that morning. I didn't need to. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought about loyalty, about love, about the quiet acts that define a life. My mother had spent 82 years showing up, every single day. No excuses, no compromises, no apologies. I realized then what I had been holding all these years. Not resentment, not frustration. Just waiting. Waiting for clarity. Waiting for truth. Waiting to see the world for what it really was. And now I could, if you've been listening for a while, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs nothing, and it means everything to us. Hit the like button while you're at it, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Stories like this matter because they remind us what real loyalty, love, and family look like. They remind us that showing up, even when it's inconvenient, is everything. I drove home slowly. The streets familiar, quiet, forgiving. I thought about Mom in her kitchen, tea in hand, crossword completed, dignity fully intact. I thought about Vanessa and the house I no longer needed to negotiate for, no longer needed to plead within. The contrast was quiet, not vengeful, but unmistakable. I parked at my own driveway, stepped out, breathed deep. The March air clean, crisp, honest. I hadn't needed to yell. I hadn't needed to fight. I hadn't needed to prove anything. The truth, the quiet action, and the choices we make every day, that had spoken for itself. I looked up at the sky, clouds moving slowly, pale and steady, and I knew. Clarity, not anger, is the greatest gift we can give ourselves. Mom had shown me that. I had learned it. And now, finally, I was living it. Loyalty and love deserve a legacy. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw family stories. I'll see you on the next one.